The Colorado River ran fast and cold beneath the wooden bridge outside of Deadwood Crossing, its spring waters swollen with snowmelt from the distant mountains. 10-year-old Emma Sullivan stood trembling at the edge of the weathered planks, her small hands bound behind her back with rough rope, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. "Please," Emma sobbed, looking up at the three men who surrounded her. "I didn't steal nothing from your store, Mr. Briggs. I was just looking at the pretty ribbons in the window." Cyrus Briggs, the cruel shopkeeper who ruled Deadwood Crossing, with an iron fist, sneered down at the frightened child. "Don't lie to me, you little thief. I saw you slip something into your pocket when you thought I wasn't looking. I didn't, I swear." Emma's voice broke with terror. "You can search me all you want. I don't have nothing that belongs to you." But Briggs wasn't interested in the truth. For months, small items had been disappearing from his store, and he had decided that the orphan girl who sometimes lingered near his windows was the perfect scapegoat. Who would believe a homeless child over a respected businessman? "Enough lies," Briggs snarled. "Boys, you know what to do." His two hired thugs, Rollins and Dutch, grabbed Emma's arms and forced her closer to the edge of the bridge. The rushing water below looked black and deadly in the afternoon shadows, and Emma knew she couldn't swim. "Mr. Briggs, please," Emma begged, her voice rising to a scream. "I can't swim. The river will kill me. Should have thought of that before you started stealing from me." Briggs replied coldly, "Maybe a dunking in that cold water will teach you some respect for other people's property." "And if it don't," Dutch added with a cruel laugh, "well, one less mouth to feed in this town won't hurt nobody." Emma's heart hammered with pure terror as she realized these men weren't just trying to scare her. They actually intended to throw her into the raging river, bound and helpless, in the frontier town of Deadwood Crossing. An orphan's life was worth less than the cost of the rope that bound her hands. "This is murder." Emma screamed desperately, "Somebody help me, please." But the bridge was isolated, half a mile from the main part of town, and her cries seemed to disappear into the wind that whipped across the water. Briggs had chosen this location carefully, knowing that no one would witness what he planned to do. "Nobody's coming to help you, girl," Briggs said with satisfaction. "Folks in this town know better than to interfere with my business. Now, boys, let's get this over with." Rollins and Dutch lifted Emma off her feet, carrying her toward the edge of the bridge despite her desperate struggles. The rope around her wrists cut into her skin as she fought against their grip, but she was too small and weak to break free. "Please, God," Emma whispered through her tears, "if you're listening, please send someone to help me." Just as the men prepared to hurl her over the side, the sound of galloping hooves echoed across the bridge. A lone rider was approaching at full speed, his horse's hooves thundering against the wooden planks. "What the hell?" Briggs muttered, turning to see who was interrupting his plans. The rider was a young cowboy, maybe 25 years old, with sandy brown hair and kind blue eyes that quickly took in the scene before him. His name was Jack Morrison, and he was returning to Deadwood Crossing after 3 months on a cattle drive to Denver. "Let that child go," Jack commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who wasn't used to being disobeyed. "Right now." Briggs forced a smile, trying to appear reasonable. "Just a little discipline for a young thief, Morrison. Nothing that concerns you." But Jack's sharp eyes had already assessed the situation. He saw the terror in Emma's face, the ropes binding her hands, the way the men were positioned at the edge of the bridge. This wasn't discipline. This was attempted murder. "I said let her go," Jack repeated, his hand moving to rest on his gun belt. "And I mean now." Dutch, emboldened by their numbers, stepped forward aggressively. "This ain't none of your business. Cowboy, ride on before you get yourself in trouble." Jack dismounted from his horse with fluid grace, his eyes never leaving the three men. "Mister, when I see grown men about to throw a child into a river, that makes it my business." "She's a thief," Briggs protested. "Caught her red-handed stealing from my store." "Then take her to the sheriff," Jack replied calmly. "Last I checked, the punishment for petty theft wasn't drowning." Emma looked at her potential savior with desperate hope. Jack Morrison had always been kind to her during his brief visits to town, sometimes even buying her a piece of candy or a small meal when he saw her begging on the streets. But could one man stand against three? Jack, Emma sobbed. They tied me up and dragged me here. I didn't steal nothing. I swear it on my mama's grave. Jack's expression hardened as he saw the rope burns on Emma's wrists and the bruises on her arms where the men had grabbed her. Whatever had happened in Briggs's store, this level of violence against a child was inexcusable. Untie her hands, Jack ordered, his voice low and dangerous. Now, like hell, Rollins snarled, pulling a knife from his belt. You wanted to play hero, cowboy? Let's see how brave you are when you're bleeding. What happened next was so fast that Emma barely saw it. Jack's Colt appeared in his hand like magic, and the sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the water. Rollins screamed and dropped his knife, clutching his wounded hand. Next man who moves toward that girl gets a bullet in the chest, Jack said, calmly, smoke still rising from his gun barrel. And I don't miss what I aim at. Dutch and Briggs backed away from Emma, suddenly realizing they had underestimated the young cowboy. Jack Morrison might look easygoing, but his reputation with a gun was well known throughout the territory. You're making a big mistake, Morrison, Briggs said, his voice shaking with rage and fear. I got influence in this town. I can make life real hard for you, and I can make death real easy for you, Jack replied without emotion. Your choice. Briggs, moving carefully, Jack approached Emma and began working on the ropes that bound her hands. His fingers were gentle as he freed her, mindful of the rope burns that marked her delicate skin. It's okay, little one, Jack whispered softly. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you. Emma collapsed against Jack's chest, sobbing with relief and delayed terror. For horrible minutes, she had been certain she was going to die in the cold, dark water below. Now, suddenly, she was safe in the arms of someone who cared enough to risk his own life for hers. Thank you, Emma whispered through her tears. Thank you for saving me. Jack held the frightened child close, feeling a fierce protectiveness rise in his chest. Emma had always tugged at his heartstrings during his visits to town. A sweet little girl trying to survive on her own in a harsh world. But now, seeing how close she had come to a horrible death, he made a decision that would change both their lives. Emma, Jack said gently, how would you like to come home with me? I got a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Good food, warm bed, and nobody will ever hurt you again. Emma looked up at him with eyes wide with hope and disbelief. You mean it? You'd really take care of me? I give you my word, Jack promised. From now on, you're under my protection. Behind them, Briggs was slowly backing toward his horse, his face twisted with rage at being thwarted. This ain't over, Morrison. That girl's a thief, and I'll prove it. When I do, I'll have the law on my side. Jack stood up, still holding Emma protectively against his side. Briggs, if you ever come near this child again, if you even look at her wrong, I'll kill you. That's not a threat, that's a promise. The deadly calm in Jack's voice made it clear he meant every word. Briggs might have influence in town, but Jack Morrison had something more powerful, the respect that came from being a good man with fast guns and the courage to use them for what was right. As Briggs and his wounded companions rode away, Emma looked up at the bridge where she had almost died, and then at the man who had saved her. The river still rushed beneath them, cold and dark, but it no longer seemed like a place of death. Instead, it had become the place where her new life began. Jack, Emma said quietly, will you really take care of me forever? Jack smiled down at the brave little girl who had endured so much. Forever and a day, Emma. That's a cowboy's promise. Subscribe to our channel to see what happens next. Will Jack be able to protect Emma from Briggs's revenge? How will a rough cowboy learn to care for a young girl? Don't miss the next chapter of this heartwarming tale of rescue and redemption on the frontier. Jack Morrison's ranch sat in a beautiful valley 10 miles north of Deadwood Crossing, surrounded by rolling hills covered with wildflowers and crossed by a gentle creek that sang softly as it wound through the property. For Emma Sullivan, who had known only the harsh streets and cruel treatment of town life, it was like stepping into a fairy tale. This is really your home? Emma asked in wonder as Jack helped her down from his horse in front of the modest but well-maintained ranch house. Our home now, Jack corrected gently, taking her small hand in his larger one. Emma, I want you to understand something important. This isn't charity, and you're not a burden. You're family now, and family takes care of each other." Emma's eyes filled with tears at those words. She had been alone for so long, surviving on scraps and kindness from strangers, that the idea of actually belonging somewhere seemed too good to be true. The front door of the house opened, and a woman in her 50s emerged, wiping her hands. On her apron, this was Mrs. Sarah Martinez, Jack's housekeeper and cook, a warm-hearted widow who had been taking care of the Morrison Ranch since Jack's mother died. 5 years earlier, "Jack," Sarah called out with obvious joy, "welcome home. We weren't expecting you back for another week." Then she noticed Emma, and her expression immediately softened with maternal concern. "And who is this little angel?" "Sarah, meet Emma Sullivan," Jack said, his hand still protectively on the child's shoulder. "She's going to be living with us from now on. Emma, this is Mrs. Martinez. She's the one who really runs this place and makes the best biscuits in 3 counties. Sarah knelt down to Emma's eye level, taking in the child's thin frame, worn clothes, and the rope burns still visible on her wrists. Her experienced eyes saw immediately that this was a child who had suffered neglect and abuse. "Hello, Emma," Sarah said gently. "Welcome home, Mija. Are you hungry?" "I was just taking a fresh apple pie out of the oven." Emma's stomach rumbled loudly at the mention of food, reminding them all that she hadn't eaten since the previous day. But more than hunger, she felt overwhelmed by the kindness in this woman's voice, the genuine care in her eyes. "Yes, ma'am," Emma whispered. "I'm very hungry." "Then come inside," Sarah said, standing and extending her hand. "Let's get you fed and cleaned up. Jack, you bring her things in." "She doesn't have any things," Jack said quietly, his voice tight, with controlled anger at Emma's circumstances. "Everything she owns is the clothes on her back." Sarah's expression hardened for a moment, clearly upset by this evidence of Emma's mistreatment. But then her face brightened with determination. "Well then, we'll just have to fix that, won't we? I've got some fabric, and I'm handy with a needle. We'll have you properly dressed in no time, over the next few hours." Emma experienced kindness unlike anything she had ever known. Sarah heated water for a proper bath, gently washing away months of dirt and grime while carefully tending to Emma's various small injuries. She wrapped the child in a soft towel and braided her newly clean hair, transforming the bedraggled street waif into a beautiful little girl. Meanwhile, Jack worked to prepare a bedroom for Emma, moving furniture and hanging curtains to create a space that would be entirely hers. When Emma saw the room, with its comfortable bed covered in a colorful quilt, a small dresser with a mirror, and windows that looked out over the peaceful valley, she broke down in tears. "I've never had my own room before," Emma sobbed, overwhelmed by the reality of her new circumstances. "When Mama and Papa were alive, we all slept in one room, and after they died, I mostly slept outside or in barns when folks would let me." Jack knelt beside her, his own eyes moist with emotion. "Emma, this room is yours for as long as you want it. Nobody will ever make you sleep outside again. You have my word on that." That evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing Sarah's excellent cooking, Emma began to tell them her story. Her parents had died in a cholera outbreak 2 years earlier, leaving her alone at age 8 with no relatives and no resources. She had survived by begging, doing odd jobs for food, and sleeping wherever she could find shelter. "I never stole nothing from Mr. Briggs's store," Emma said earnestly. "I was just looking at the pretty ribbons in his window, wishing I had money to buy one for my hair. He came out yelling and accusing me of theft, but I never took nothing." Jack's jaw tightened with anger. "Emma, even if you had taken something, what Briggs tried to do was wrong. No child deserves to be hurt like that, regardless of what they might have done." "But why did he hate me so much?" Emma asked, her young mind struggling to understand such cruelty. Sarah reached over to stroke Emma's hair gently. "Some people, Mija, they have so much anger and meanness in their hearts that they look for someone to hurt, someone who can't fight back. It's not about you, it's about the darkness in them." Jack nodded in agreement. "Emma, there are good people and bad people in this world. Unfortunately, the bad ones sometimes have power, and they use it to hurt those who are weaker. But I promise you this, As long as I draw a breath, nobody will hurt you again." Over the following weeks, Emma began to bloom like a flower that had finally found good soil and sunshine. She helped Sarah with cooking and cleaning, learned to tend the vegetable garden, and even began working with the gentler horses under Jack's patient guidance. But their peaceful life was shattered one afternoon when riders approached the ranch. Emma was hanging laundry on the line when she saw them coming, and immediately recognized the lead figure, Cyrus Briggs, accompanied by Sheriff Thompson and two deputies. "Jack," Emma screamed, running toward the house in terror. "It's Mr. Briggs. He's come for me." Jack emerged from the barn, his face grim as he saw the approaching party. He had been expecting this confrontation, knowing that Briggs wouldn't simply accept defeat and move on. "Emma, go inside with Sarah," Jack commanded gently but firmly. "Let me handle this. They're going to take me away, aren't they?" Emma sobbed, clinging to Jack's arm. "They're going to say I'm a thief and drag me back to town." "Nobody's taking you anywhere," Jack assured her, though his hand rested on his gun belt. "You're safe here, Emma. I promised you that, and I keep my promises." Sheriff Thompson dismounted as the group reached the ranch house, his expression uncomfortable. Jack had known Tom Thompson for years and respected him as an honest lawman, which made this situation all the more difficult. "Jack," Thompson said with obvious reluctance, "I'm sorry to bother you, but Mr. Briggs here has filed formal charges against the girl for theft. I have to bring her in for questioning." "What evidence?" Jack asked calmly, though his eyes were hard as steel. Briggs stepped forward with a triumphant smile. "Found this hidden under some old crates behind my store." He held up a small silver locket on a chain, worth at least $5. "Girl must have dropped it when she was running away, after you interfered with her punishment." Emma gasped in recognition. "That's my mama's locket. Papa gave it to her on their wedding day. Convenient story." Briggs sneered. Girl's obviously a practiced liar as well as a thief. But Emma's reaction had told Jack everything he needed to know. The child's shock and recognition were genuine, which meant Briggs had somehow obtained her mother's locket and was now using it to frame her. "Sheriff," Jack said quietly, "I think you need to hear the whole story before you make any arrests. Subscribe to our channel to see the explosive conclusion. How will Jack prove Emma's innocence? Will Briggs succeed in his cruel scheme, or will justice finally prevail? Don't miss the final chapter where truth battles lies and a cowboy's promise is put to the ultimate test." Sheriff Thompson looked uncomfortable as he stood in the yard of the Morrison Ranch, caught between his duty as a lawman and his respect for Jack Morrison. He had known Jack for years as an honest, decent man, but Cyrus Briggs was a powerful figure in Deadwood Crossing, and the evidence seemed clear-cut. "Jack," Thompson said reluctantly, "I understand you've grown fond of the girl, but the law is the law. If she stole that locket, she didn't steal it." Jack interrupted firmly. "Sheriff, look at that child's face. Does she look like someone who's been caught in a lie, or someone who's seen something that belongs to her?" Emma stood in the doorway of the ranch house, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the locket in Briggs's hand. "That's Mama's locket," she whispered. "Papa saved for months to buy it for her. She wore it every day until she died." "Pretty story," Briggs said coldly, "but that don't change the fact that I found it hidden behind my store where she dropped it." Jack studied Briggs carefully, noting the man's confident demeanor and the timing of this convenient discovery. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. "Briggs," Jack said slowly, "when exactly did you find this locket?" "This morning." Briggs replied quickly, "Was moving some old crates, and there it was, hidden underneath where nobody would think to look. And in 3 weeks, you never thought to search behind your store for stolen goods?" Jack's voice carried a note of skepticism. "That seems like the first place you'd look." Sheriff Thompson was beginning to look troubled as well. "Cyrus, that is a bit odd. Usually when there's theft, you search the immediate area right away." Emma suddenly stepped forward, her young voice clear and strong despite her tears. "Sheriff Thompson, sir, may I see the locket, please?" Thompson looked at Briggs, who reluctantly handed over the piece of jewelry. Emma took it with trembling hands, her fingers tracing the delicate engravings on its surface. "This was my mama's most precious thing," Emma said softly. When she was dying of the fever, she gave it to me and told me to never let it go, that it would always connect me to her love. I wore it every day until Emma's voice broke, and she looked up with sudden understanding and horror. Until the night I was sleeping in the old church. I woke up and it was gone from around my neck. I searched everywhere, but I never found it. Jack's eyes hardened as he began to piece together what had happened. Emma, when was this? About a month ago. Sir, I cried for days because I thought I'd lost the only thing I had left of Mama and Papa. Briggs shifted uncomfortably, and Jack noticed the subtle change in the man's demeanor. That's a touching tale, Briggs said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. But it don't prove nothing. Girl could have hidden it and forgot where. Actually, said a new voice from behind them. It proves quite a lot. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman approaching on foot from the direction of town. Jack recognized her as Mrs. Agnes Fletcher, the church organist who often slept in the church to watch over the building. Mrs. Fletcher, Sheriff Thompson said with surprise, "What brings you all the way out here?" The old woman looked directly at Briggs with disgust and contempt. Couldn't stand by and watch this evil man destroy that innocent child with his lies. Briggs's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about, old woman, don't you?" Mrs. Fletcher's voice was sharp with righteous anger. "I saw you, Cyrus Briggs. Saw you creeping around the church that night, going through the belongings of the poor children who sleep there. Saw you take that locket right off that girl's neck while she was sleeping." Emma gasped, and Jack felt his hand move instinctively toward his gun. "You stole it from her while she was sleeping." Mrs. Fletcher nodded grimly. "Been watching him for weeks, collecting evidence of his cruelty toward the town's poor children. But when I heard about what happened at the bridge, and now this false accusation, I couldn't stay silent anymore." "That's preposterous," Briggs protested, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "You're just a crazy old woman." "Maybe so," Mrs. Fletcher replied calmly, "but I'm a crazy old woman with good eyesight and a long memory. Sheriff Thompson, that man has been systematically stealing from and abusing the orphan children of this town for months, taking their few possessions, denying them work, making their lives miserable for his own amusement." Sheriff Thompson's expression had grown dark as he processed this information. "Mrs. Fletcher, are you willing to swear to this testimony in court?" "I am indeed, and I can provide witnesses. Other children have seen him taking things, but they were too scared to speak up against such a powerful man." Jack stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet. "Briggs, you tried to kill an innocent child to cover up your own crimes. Then when that failed, you tried to frame her with evidence you stole from her. You can't prove nothing," Briggs said desperately, but his bravado was crumbling. "Actually, I can," Mrs. Fletcher said, producing a small notebook from her pocket. "I've been keeping detailed records, dates, times, witnesses, everything you've done to harm the children of this town." Emma looked up at Jack with wonder and relief. "He really did take Mama's locket from me while I was sleeping." "Yes, sweetheart," Jack said gently, kneeling down to her level. "And now we're going to make sure he pays for what he's done to you and the other children." Sheriff Thompson stepped forward and placed his hand on Briggs's shoulder. "Cyrus Briggs, you're under arrest for theft, assault, attempted murder, and filing false charges. You have a lot to answer for." As the deputies moved to arrest Briggs, the man's composure finally broke completely. "It was just a stupid orphan," he screamed. "Nobody cares what happens to street brats. I was cleaning up the town. Those street brats are children," Jack said with cold fury, "and every one of them matters more than a piece of garbage like you." Emma clutched the recovered locket to her chest, tears of joy streaming down her face. After so many weeks of grief over losing her mother's precious gift, she had it back, and more importantly, she had found people who truly cared about her welfare. "Jack," Emma said softly, "thank you for believing me. Thank you for protecting me." Jack pulled Emma into a gentle hug. "Emma, I will always believe you, and I will always protect you. That's what family does." Mrs. Fletcher smiled at the touching scene. "Mr. Morrison, you've done a wonderful thing, taking in this child. She's been through more hardship than most adults, but she's got a strong spirit and a good heart. She's taught me more than I've taught her." Jack replied honestly, Emma's shown me what real courage looks like. She never gave up hope, even when everything seemed hopeless. As Briggs was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Emma looked out over the peaceful ranch that had become her home. The same river that had nearly claimed her life now watered the valley where she had found safety and love. Mrs. Fletcher, Emma said suddenly, what will happen to the other children in town, the ones who don't have anybody to protect them? The elderly woman's eyes twinkled with approval at Emma's concern for others, despite her own recent trauma. Well, child, I've been thinking about that. Perhaps it's time this town had a proper orphanage, run by people who actually care about children's welfare. Jack looked thoughtful. That's not a bad idea. Emma, what would you think about helping me set up a place where children without families could find safety and care? Emma's face lit up with excitement. Could we really do that? Help other kids? Like Mr. Briggs was hurting. We could indeed, Jack confirmed. After all, you know better than anyone what those children need most. 6 months later, the Morrison Children's Home opened its doors in a large house that Jack purchased in Deadwood Crossing. Emma, now 11 and thriving under Jack and Sarah's care, became the home's first official helper, using her own experiences to comfort and guide newly arrived children. Cyrus Briggs was sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison for his crimes, and his store was sold to pay restitution to his victims. The new owner, a kind man with children of his own, made it a point to hire some of the older orphans and treat them with dignity and respect. Emma never forgot the terror of that day on the bridge, but she also never forgot the lesson it taught her, that even in the darkest moments, hope could appear in the form of someone willing to risk everything to do what was right. The locket that her mother had given her became a symbol not just of her parents' love, but of the new family she had found, and the river that had once threatened to be her grave became a source of life for the valley where lost children found new homes and fresh starts. Jack Morrison, the cowboy who had pulled one small girl from the jaws of death, discovered that saving Emma had saved him too, giving his life a purpose and meaning he had never known before. Together, they built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy, proving that sometimes the greatest rescues are the ones that save not just a life, but a soul. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the American frontier. This tale of Emma and Jack shows us that true heroism isn't about seeking glory, but about standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join us for more emotional journeys that prove how one moment of courage can change the course of multiple lives forever. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that there are still people in this world willing to dive into dangerous waters to pull others to safety.